Good evening, Council, Senior Management Team, residents of Pelham. I see we have quorum, so I will now call into session this regular meeting of Council for Monday, April 1st. And we'll first rise for the singing of the national anthem. All those that can. We will be led by the clerk. Okay, councilors, after looking over the agenda, I guess I have a motion to read. A motion put forward by Councilor Stewart, seconded by Councilor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that the agenda for the April 1st, 2019 regular meeting of Council be adopted. First of all, after looking at, is there any changes that any councilors want to make? Okay, so then it will be as circulated then. All those in favor? Okay, none opposed. Motion carries. And now, as I must ask all councilors if you have a pecuniary interest or general nature thereof in any of the agenda items. Okay. Not seeing any. Ask the clerk to please take note. No thing. Okay, now we're into presentations and delegations. We have a presentation from Literacy Link Niagara from a Mr. Gay Douglas. If you could take the stand. Approach the mic. Ms. Gay, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, my mistake.
No worries. Thank you so much. Just down it should get me through the slide presentation. Thank you very much, Mayor Junkin and council members. It's my pleasure to be here today, and I will keep this presentation within the 10 minutes. I think we have about 40 slides in the deck, but I believe you have copies of them or will have access to them anyway. So I will, I promise to stay within the timelines. So I wanted to give a little bit of sort of background to this presentation today. I am the co-executive director of a very small organization called Literacy Link Niagara, and it's our job to plan and coordinate adult literacy services in the region on behalf of the Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities. There are 10 different literacy programs in this region, and there are 22 sites across the area, across Niagara, and they're often operating a little under the radar because of the stigma that affects people who struggle with literacy. And because of not a huge marketing budget that most of our organizations have, they are challenged often to have a strong face in the community. So my job today is to sort of acquaint everyone here, including the guests and the observers here today, about the issue of literacy in 2019, which you may assume is probably an issue of the past. So I'm going to bring you up to speed on what's happening in this very interesting sector. I found it 23 years ago when I was working in Toronto and needed a job to bring me back to Niagara. And it was definitely under the radar for me, and so it is for most people, I'm finding. So we're going to deal, I thought the easiest way to cover this was to look at some common myths and facts, because there are a lot out there. So let's look at that. Okay, so we're a regional literacy network, one of 16 in the province, charged with coordination and planning on behalf of the provincial government. We link internally, making sure that our programs work collaboratively together, and that we do an annual service plan, provide training and support to our agencies. But we also link externally with all of the different sectors that are affected by literacy. Things like poverty, justice, health, employment. We also do research and development, and we also do objective assessments on folks who may have challenges. So here's myth number one. Literacy is all about reading and writing. So I invite you to take a look at that particular slide. I'm not going to read it to you. I'm going to make the assumption that most of the people in this room are able to read that. But it really is about the broad range of utilizing written and digital materials, being able to understand them, being able to apply them, being able to understand in context what that particular image on the page means. I remember meeting a learner a couple of years ago. Someone had handed him a schedule that was a series of boxes and charts, and made the assumption that he was going to be able to figure out what each column meant and how it equated with the lines across. So it's that kind of thing. It's understanding bus schedules. It's bigger, more than anything today, it's understanding digital literacy. We can't assume that everyone has strong internet access or they have access to a computer. And as we know, it's getting more and more difficult to access information unless you do have those tools at your disposal. It's also about critical thinking. Our programs help people work on those what we call soft skills, which are actually quite hard skills in terms of helping people plan their day, judge time, consider all of the options that may be open to them. Our learners often have very small worlds. I remember speaking with a learner in Port Colborne a couple of years ago who said they had never traveled outside of Port Colborne. They didn't have a license. They had quit school at a very young age and had never really worked full-time, enough certainly to have a car. So their worlds tend to be very, very small. So here's how UNESCO defines literacy, and we do like this definition ourselves. Beyond its conventional concept as a set of reading, writing, and counting skills, it's now understood as a means of identification, understanding, interpretation, creation, and communication in an increasingly digital, text-mediated, information-rich, fast-changing world. Here's myth number two, that people are either literate or not. We look at literacy as a set of literacies. Some people are very, very strong, let's say in writing, but can't manage math. I'm one of those people. I love to read, I love to write, do a lot of research online. Mathematics might be a bit of a challenge for me. Some of the people we know who are involved in adult literacy programs could take a car apart, could put that car back together, could take a computer apart, put it back together, but they may not have rich digital literacy skills when it comes for searching for information. So no one is either literate or illiterate. The bar has been raised. I think the challenge is that we have such high expectations now in the world of work and in the community that people are going to be able to understand what we send them. I'm sure that that Pelham sends out information to its residents on a regular basis, hoping that everything that's said is understood and responded to, and sometimes that could be a challenge for some people. Just a little low for some reason. Literacy tends to affect older people with limited education. So there are definitely some strong correlations between level of education, but we also know of young people who have finished high school or sometimes finished post-secondary who still struggle with some of those literacy skills. So I thought I would share who our learners were in the last fiscal year in Niagara that we have data for. So in 2017 and 18, 41 of the learners in the programs in Niagara, and there was about 1,500 learners who are on a consistent basis registered at one of those programs. 41% were between the ages of 25 and 44. 32% have a high school education. 21% have some college. We had 7% with a bachelor's degree. But we also have a large number of people who have a disability or who identify as having a disability. And I don't mean just a learning disability. Many folks have physical disabilities which held them back from attending school when they were young. And as a result, there's a gap there between where they would like to be and what the experience that they had as children. Myth number 4, and I think I'm on schedule to finish in the next 4 minutes. Am I good? Great, thank you. Myth number 4, that literacy issues are about newcomers. The reality is that the provincial government and its literacy and basic skills program is set up to serve long-term residents of the province. In fact, you have to have a very high score in something called the Canadian Language Benchmarks to be able to qualify for a literacy program in the province of Ontario. Our programs are offered in French, English, ASL, and we also have a whole stream of Indigenous programming. But they are designed to serve learners who somehow have missed those first valuable years or have an unidentified learning disability or have other significant challenges that prevent them from being able to reach their potential. Myth number 5 is that it's up to the school system to solve this problem. And it is not at all. It's really the problem of municipalities, of workplaces, of business, of community to ensure that people have access to the kinds of information in this information-rich age that they need to be fully involved in their communities, at work, and at home. And it's really about everyone working together. And in fact, for people who are working, let's face it, there are many new platforms and approaches, especially when it comes to digital literacy, that I wouldn't access or wouldn't need to learn unless it was offered to me or it was forced upon me in my workplace. So when you think about people who may have been out of the work world for a while, often they do not have the opportunity to practice, maintain, and improve their skills. The next number of slides I'm not going to read to you. They're there for your information. What it does is compare some of the EQAO data, which is collected from both primary and secondary students in the province of Ontario, and compare what is happening. These slides will show you, and as I say, I'm very cognizant of the time, that there's significant differences between the grade 3 scores and the grade 6 scores. Specifically, math is falling off. So we're wondering if in the future, it is currently a pretty big issue for all of our literacy programs with people coming with math needs very strongly. And what we're seeing is there's quite a gap between grade 3, grade 6, and also between the communities which are middle income families and areas of poverty. There's quite a few deficits in those communities. Number 6, I will finish with this one. And I hear this a lot, this may be an issue for some people. Where the heck are they? Because I don't know anyone who has any kind of literacy issue. And I certainly said that to myself 24 years ago. But few adults will ever admit it. In fact, even when they come to a literacy program, it could be one of the most terrifying things that they've ever done. There's a significant stigma for having a literacy challenge. And boy, I've met some incredibly charming, bright, verbally amazing folks who were challenged when a pencil was put in front of them. So often they have learned to be great copers in this situation, and everyone knows someone who may be struggling. Data from the ministry, from Stats Canada rather, the last time they did a study about 10 years ago, showed a very, very flat line that over the last 20 to 30 years, between 30 and 50%, depending on where you live, of the adults would benefit from some kind of literacy program, either digital literacy, reading, writing, mathematics, or anything that's on your third slide. How'd I do? 10 minutes? Not too bad? Pretty close. I would love to entertain any questions. Yes, Mayor Junkin?
So before I turn it over to council, so do you work parallel to the DSBN within the DSBN?
Great question. DSBN is one of our member agencies that we support and help coordinate and plan with. We have a great segue I should mention the programs. District School Board of Niagara, Niagara Catholic District School Board, Fort Erie Native Friendship Center, Niagara Regional Native Center, Niagara College at both locations has something called literacy and basic skills, which they call academic upgrading, because the word literacy is terrifying for many people. And we also have at least 5 different community-based agencies that have volunteers or work with small groups. So you're seeing everything from a volunteer to a learner pair, and then all the way up to the college with classrooms full of people who are, most of whom are preparing for post-secondary, and everything in between.
And your statistics come from?
EQAO results,
Oh,
which are publicly available.
Okay, yes, I see that. I have another question,
Great.
but I forget it, so I'll open it to council.
It'll come back, it always
It will
does.
come back. Any questions from other councilors? Councilor Wink?
For you, Mr. Mayor, so where does all the funding for Literacy Link Niagara come from? Is it provincial? Are you getting any United Way funding?
No.
Or
Because we don't serve learners ourselves, our small staff groups support the programs that do offer programs for learners. We're not really commonly funded through regular means because we can't show any particular client group the benefits. We're a network, so we support those programs. Our funding primarily comes from the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities through Employment Ontario. So when you see the Employment Ontario logo at many employment centres, it also funds apprenticeship and also funds literacy and basic skills. So that's the stream.
all right, thank you.
We're a bit of a little glitch on the radar at the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities. We barely show up because it's such a small part of their portfolio, but since about 92, the government has been funding it. Before that, it was all community groups raising their own dollars in their own communities.
Any other questions? Then I will go back. Not wanting to step on anybody's toes, but when you see that at grade 3 and then at grade 6, the math skills start to fall off, you seem to go out of your way to make sure that you're not blaming the education system.
Absolutely.
But then whose fault is this? I mean, it's one thing to have 1 or 2 children fall through the cracks, but when you see the kind of statistics that you're showing here, it makes you wonder if maybe we shouldn't be doing different things within the education system. What's your take on that, please?
Well, my take is that the data is quite common across the entire province. It's just not Niagara's problem that we see this happening. And that when I get called, actually what's interesting, I get more calls from parents looking for help for their kids than I do with adult learners or their families looking for help for the adult, because our name doesn't necessarily say adult. And what I always tell parents is that they should go back to the school if they're concerned about their child's learning or any gaps the child may have or any concerns. Go back to the school, speak to the teachers, speak to the principal, and work your way up that way.
Okay, great, thank you.
We know that school boards don't have all the resources they used to have 30 years ago.
Yes, I realize that's part of the problem also, yes. Thank you for this.
Very welcome.
Okay, no more questions? Thank you for that presentation.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you. And then you have a good evening. So we have here a motion put forward by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that Council receive the delegation and presentation from Literacy Link Niagara regarding myths and facts about adult literacy for information. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes. And a delegation from the Pelham Library Board, a Donald Brown, who is chair of the Library Board Finance Committee. Welcome, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I also have some supporting colleagues here from the board. I have Amy Guimet, who is our acting CEO.
Welcome.
Gwen McDougall, who is a longtime board member all over the province and is well-versed in the Libraries Act. And new board members, Nicole Nolan and Madison. Oh, she moved way back there.
Thank you.
We're here to briefly review our request, which was initially submitted in January for an increase in operating funds for 2019, rather than the 0% increase that was previously decided by council. Our required increase is $44,000. It's made up primarily of four things that we can't control, that we can't do without, like custodial services, cost of living raises for the staff. Development charges are decreasing under the new bylaw, and then all the other bits and pieces that are subject to inflationary pressures. I know it sounds like a big number. It actually is less than 1/3 of 1% of the tax revenue of the town. So it's down into the decimals. One of our problems is that these items, one is the custodial service, the cost of living for staff, the development charges, and inflation, are going to happen year after year. So if we end up with a 0 increase this year, then we'll have to ask for something like $80,000 next year. If we manage to make the 0 work, it can't carry on into the future, and I will point out why. In the past, when we've had funding problems, we have reduced operating hours, which is a big driver of cost, and we've also reduced the amount of money we spend on the collection, both print media and digital media. Those are our two big categories. If we are ending up with a 0% increase, we'll have to have another cut to operating hours, and we will have less spending on the collection. Our recollection, those of us who have been around for a while, is that patrons don't react well to cuts in hours. We get people that show up Saturday morning at Fonthill when we're not open, and they want to know why we're not open. Well, we had to cut something last year in Fonthill in order to make something work in Maple Acre. So again, those two things hit home. We have a couple of additional problems that we didn't point out during, I think, our presentation in January, and that is that we're approaching the end of the useful life of some of our IT equipment. And within our budget, we have $5,000 a year to maintain and upgrade. And what we want to do is try and get this all on a schedule, a best practices schedule, so that we are constantly turning over the equipment and keeping it up to date. So that is one of our problems. We have some soft items in the revenue budget. We get 2 grants from the province. One is a general operating grant, and then the other is a grant for Wi-Fi resources. They're never guaranteed. They funnel through the Southern Ontario Library Association. As long as we have less than 20,000 people, we're in a fairly good category to get those grants because they're trying to help these smaller centers. But we won't know until October or November whether, in fact, we will get those grants, and together they add up to over 40,000. So we hope that you will consider revisiting the 0% increase. Any information that we can provide now or any time that you want, we'll gladly provide it. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Yep, thank you for that presentation. Questions to any councilors? Councilor Hildebrand.
Yes, thank you for taking your time out and visiting us today. Basically, being a new counselor, I had to go online and do research into libraries and library boards and how they operate and all those kind of things. So I went to basically all the Ontario Ministry sites. And one of the things I did research was the Ontario Library Association membership. And do you belong to the Ontario Library membership?
Yes, we do. We have a board membership and a staff membership.
Can I ask you why it doesn't show up on the internet then?
I don't know. I can show you our receipts for it.
No, I believe you, because that's one of the things I hope you would belong to,
2 memberships for staff and 2 for board, so.
so you are on there. Okay. Because I believe that's a really important thing to have, because reading online, they said these provide guidelines for provide public libraries of all sizes with a framework for development and fiscal responsibility and all those kind of things.
Yeah, and they just produced a pile of statistics on libraries related to 2017, I guess, and that's, some of our data has come from there, that we are very low on the size of our collection compared to our population and our number of patrons. We have an average of 2 books or 2 things per person, and I think the system average was close to 5.
Yeah. It might have been even higher.
The other thing that was evident from those stats was that, according to, again, our population and our patron numbers, we should have about twice as much space as we do.
Okay.
We have 8,000 square feet in Font Hill, and if you do, you can split the data into 2 streams, look at Maple Lake or look at Font Hill. Font Hill should have at least 16,000 square feet. That's not part of the operating request, but we just wanted you to know that those kind of statistics are available.
You done?
Through
Oh,
through
go
you,
ahead.
Mr. Mayor. Obviously, we're looking for out-of-the-box solutions right now, because obviously, we, the town, are in a similar situation as you are. You obviously know, because I read the introduction to your letter, that we're all facing financial constraint. And out-of-the-box thinking, I think, is what we're looking for. And I noticed going online what the requirements were for leadership in terms of how many leaders you need in terms of staff members. And is there any chance of reviewing the functional responsibility in that area?
No, I don't. Well, we think we've got slightly too many hours at Maple Acre, and so it's sort of a given that we're going to try and trim that back some to bring it in line. But again, the number of hours for both what we'll call frontline staff and support staff in the statistical reports, we're right in the range of all the libraries and communities our size. Staff at the library work very hard. That's my observation just as a patron. I understand everybody looks at those sorts of things in terms of resource implications, but I myself would not think we're overstaffed.
Just to add to that,
Yeah.
from the Ontario Public Guidelines from 2018, it says currently you should have at least 1 full-time professional librarian on staff per 10,000 people. That's all we have at this time, and that's all we have usually all the time. But that's 10,000, so we should have at least 1 3/4 of full-time professional librarians. We only have 1.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I thought you had a CAO, and then, I'm not sure, you're the acting CAO now. So do we have 2 CAOs, or?
No, there's a CEO and a deputy CEO. The CEO is in charge of the entire library and the planning, strategic planning, and the financials. And the deputy CEO is the librarian who can charge the collection and managing the staff, basically.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Is there any chance, because of the situation we're all facing, that possibly we could operate in the next year with 1 CAO as the acting CAO?
I have to say, I'm probably doing work at 2 in the morning a lot of times just to get going.
Yes, I get the emails.
I'm barely managing that.
I keep looking at the email and say, why is she still up?
It's a
It's pretty
two-person
tight
job.
right now, because we've had to take some of the stuff that Amy would normally do and move that down so that she could step up and do some of the stuff
When I look
the
at the
CEO does.
job description for the CEO, probably when I'm doing the acting, I'm doing probably 1/3 of what the job description is, because I just don't have time to meet it all. So things are falling back as you go along, so.
Thank you.
If I can ask a couple of questions. The salary that you pay your CAO, is that a legislated amount, or?
It's not through job equity, but it is very much within what the other jobs are being offered out there at that rate. It falls well within it.
Thank you. And then getting back to volunteers. We just did a new matrix for the MCC, right from the ground up, from the pilot program that has been in place since September until January. And we as a town are hoping to use a lot more volunteer staff, whether it be at the front desk, wherever in the building. If you were to search your soul, you don't think that you could increase the hours or maintain hours by using more volunteers?
Unfortunately, no. We use the volunteers every place that we can. We use 2,900 hours of volunteer work with us, but the people at the desk are handling sensitive information, people's information behind, like all their private information that they've given you, what they're checking out, and we have to keep that away from, not away from volunteers, but be fully supervised in privacy. And to have someone else maintaining that who's not fully trained or may not show up for a job, our level of service would go straight down. Plus, we would have to manage those volunteers, and so if they don't show up, we're looking for someone else. Plus, we have to constantly train way more staff.
Yeah.
It would be the same as the town having volunteers working the front desk where everybody comes with payments and questions.
Yeah. Okay, Councilor Corbin?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. When we talk about new janitor, we had a janitor, we talked about this about
It's
6 weeks
yes.
ago or 2 months ago. So what I understand is that we did have a janitor, he retired, we had to get a new one, and they're costing us another $21,000.
Basically, what's happened over the history is we had a janitor that was at such a low rate that he saved us so much money for so many years, probably 15, 20 years. But now it's come to the point where, because he didn't raise his rates all the way along. And we weren't that happy with the service at one point, so we actually asked for more bids, and we could not afford them at that time. But now he's retired, so we're forced to go with the bids.
And what were you, through you, Mr. Mayor, what were you paying him? Or do you have an idea?
It was around $16,000 a year.
16, okay. And the other question through you, Mr. Mayor, the 12,244, what would that be in percentage-wise through the staffing?
Which one, sorry? Oh, the
it's
staffing?
the
Yeah, the increase in
cost of
salaries and
living
wages.
and, two people who are, steps through the rank.
No, do you, and I'm sorry, do you have a percentage of what that increase would be?
What the percentage is?
Yeah. And I apologize, I know,
It's about 2%, 1.9, whatever.
1.9?
Whatever the
Okay.
rate of inflation.
And that's, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's divided by how many people?
There's about, let me see, there's 4 full-time and 6 part-time staff plus 3 students.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Oh, Councilor Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got one other question. I was just recently in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and I saw that they had library book lending machines. They actually had book lending machines in the arena. They've got them all over the place.
Yes.
Is that another way that would facilitate reducing your costs?
No, not at all. That actually just increases the costs. What it does is it gives more access points, but it doesn't reduce they increased their cost when they added those, because now you have to go and supply those places. You have to go out and every day come in and out with staff delivering them, and you're not reducing any staff at the building. What it did was increase more access to people in the community, and the facilities themselves, the vending machines themselves cost upward of $50,000 each.
That is Niagara on the Lake, though.
No, but I've seen the comparison operating costs from Niagara-on-the-Lake and Pelham, and it's considerably less.
Okay. Councilor Trophy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. On your little proposal here where it has under expenditures, you have option 2019 budget, option A and option B. And where it says staffing costs, option A is 762,000 and option B is 732,000. Can you just explain that?
Sure. That would be reducing the operating hours by 12 hours and reducing staff by 15 hours. So we'd be cutting staff by 15 hours.
Okay, 15? Okay, so then is that 15 per
15 hours total,
total?
yeah. And then it would be 12 hours operating total.
So 27 hours a week.
No, it's 12 hours operating equals to 15
Oh,
hours
15
staff.
hours, okay.
So it's not staff per, it's not 1 per 1, but
Okay.
full-time to fill in some of the other hours that are operating.
Now, when you, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, is there anywhere that you guys could come up and cut $40,000 without reducing the hours at Maple Acre and Fenwick?
Unfortunately, the history has been, over the years, every time we don't get an increase that we need to pay for the books and things like that, the books end up costing us. So every year that certain things increase, and we have been adding staff, it's just that as COLA increases, sometimes we only get COLA, but yet people are moving to the grid. But we're not adding staff hours. The only time we've added staff hours since I've been there, which is about 6 years, is when 2 years ago when Maple Acre opened, we had 14 hours operating, we added 14 hours staff. And at that time, we did it very conservatively because we actually needed 28 hours for staff to cover 14 hours, but we only asked for 14 hours of staff. So staff more and more are taking on more jobs with less hours being allocated for it. And it just keeps cutting into the percentage of the non-salary. Every year that we don't get enough, we end up cutting other things because you can't, otherwise you're cutting hours for the operating rate, so.
The only place we have any flex is hours and how much we spend on the collection. Just about everything else is fixed, and there's sort of no real discretionary pots of money in our budget at all. That's been my experience over the years that I've been involved, that the budgets are quite tight.
They're tight everywhere. Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, last one. So you said there's 9 staff, including the CAO?
There's, 10 staff, including the CEO, plus 3 students.
Okay, and the students get paid?
Yes, they're pages, so they shelve the books and things like that.
Okay, so 13 people make up for that 762,000.
Yeah, it's including, of course, all the benefits and everything.
Good.
Councillor Stewart, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. To the best of your knowledge, has there ever been a year where you didn't get the provincial operating grant?
No, but it's been the same for over 20 years, the same amount. It's never been increased by inflation or anything. But certain governments
Wi-Fi
have-
one is a little more tenuous.
certain governments, though, have come in and said they're going to look at it again. And at one point, the Wynne government said they were going to increase it, but as soon as Ford came in, they decreased it back. But at that time, there was actually going through the rumors that he might reduce it. So we're just glad he got the same one.
Thank you.
One last question, sorry. Through maybe like a possible partnership through local schools, is there any possibility of the library board and the local schools fundraising to capture that $40,000?
We're doing as much fundraising as we can with the hours we have. We're like stretched so thin right now that adding one fundraising event even is staff time that we can't even, we'd have to take away from programming or something.
Okay.
We're constantly looking for which ways we can increase the fundraising. So if we find an event that would make more money, we replace it, the event that's less money. So we do that all the time. But we run right now, 4, 5, 6, 7 annual events through library staff for fundraising.
And that last, and just a point of interest, it's not that we're trying to be negative or anything, we're just in a tough spot as well.
Understand that?
Okay,
I understand
just
that.
like the library board is, so something's gotta give. So don't take it the wrong way.
That's Councillor Hunt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So when you mentioned that the CEO salary was on par, are you measuring that against other like-sized towns?
Yeah,
Or are you comparing it to Toronto or
No,
St.
absolutely.
Catharines?
Other like-sized towns, for example, Lincoln Library, which is just a slightly bigger community than here, theirs was just slightly higher range. But we're well within the range. We're lower than most of the other Niagara communities that are, well, we're lower than all the other Niagara communities that are higher in volume than us, population than us.
And the difference between the CEO salary and the deputy CEO salary would be about?
30,000?
Okay. Oh, I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
one last thing.
Sorry.
Now, that came up, when you're comparing the Lincoln CO, correct me if I'm wrong, you're probably gonna know this, I believe that the Lincoln, does not have a deputy CEO. They do? Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Stewart?
Mayor,
Yeah.
I think it's West Lincoln that doesn't have a deputy
Yes,
CEO.
you're right.
West Lincoln, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the presentation. So we will, we have a motion before council put forward by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that council receive the delegation and presentation from the Town of Pelham Public Library Board for information. Any further discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor of, for information? Okay, and all those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, where are we? Right here. Is Diana Houston isn't here? No, okay. Okay, so we're here, but now we're down to adoption in a minute. Okay. So the regional counselor is not present tonight, so we will obviously skip that. Next is the adoption of minutes. A motion put forward by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Trophy. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated in red. Excuse me. SC 08-2019, Special Council Minutes, February 23rd, 2019. Number 2, SC 10-2019, Special Council Minutes, March 18th, 2019. Number 3, C-05, 2019, Council Minutes, March 18th, 2019. Number 4, SC-12, 2019, Special Council Minutes, March 25th, 2019. After viewing the minutes, has council have any comments? Not seeing any, I call the motion. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Down to business arising from council minutes. 7.1, Meridian Community Center report. Have put forward a motion from Councillor Trophy, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that council receive the 2018 Meridian Community Center report for information. Discussion on this matter. Councillor Kaur.
Yes, a lot of discrepancies, through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a lot of discrepancies through this report, and it deals right through the whole report. It's very difficult to maneuver through the report. Revenue of advertising revenue that doesn't show up here. Contracts with the junior Bs. I know one of the contracts weren't signed. And that was the advertising one.
So just wait, so Ms. CEO, do you want to attack, return the, one at a time? Answer the questions one at a time?
I don't want to attack him. Do you want to just go question by question?
Yeah, okay, and I hope I don't,
No, this is what we're here for.
okay.
Yeah.
So, why wasn't a $30,000 advertising? We were supposed to get a $30,000 advertising on June the 15th of this year, and it doesn't show up on your revenue sheet.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, the agreement actually starts on June of 2018 and goes to, the full year is to June of 2019. That's the first year. So it's,
Excuse me, but there was no contract signed.
yeah, so.
So is
we
this
have
a
an
verbal
RFP.
contract,
No,
or-
we have an RFP. So we went out for an RFP, and that was part of the, so the issue that we had is that when the RFP went out, and the submission came in, there were some advertising restrictions on the pledge agreements that that there were restrictions placed on the person doing the advertising that he wasn't aware of when the RFP went out. So, we're working on that. With regards to the revenue for this fiscal year, for this year, the revenue will come in June of 2019 for the full year. So the only thing is, I did meet with the advertiser, because of the restrictions placed on, from the pledge agreement. So for example, there aren't any, no financial institutions can advertise in that arena, or insurance companies. So these were different organizations that previously in the other arena we had. So there was revenue that was lost from that. And so saying that in the first year he wasn't able to meet the full 30,000, but he will be able to meet a portion, at least 15,000 of that amount.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, so I went in this morning, and in the Accipiter Arena, there's 57 advertising boards with 6 ICE logos, and when I went to the small arena, there's 17 and 6. I don't see where he had a problem getting advertising.
No, he has it. So the total advertising revenue that was generated is 63,500. The total lost revenue because of the restrictions that happened, which included also taking off the advertising on the Zamboni, was 39,000. So when the proposal was made to the town, the calculation was based roughly on, close to $90,000 of revenue.
So no disrespect, where is this? Like, where's this information? Why are we just finding it out today that there's an agreement? The only thing I'm saying is that this gentleman's got our money, and we don't see any of it in your revenue. So he collected 60,000. Where's that money now? He's got it, am I right?
Yes, but part of that was part of the revenue that, a portion was their revenue that is used to help fund his hockey team.
Yep, okay.
So our revenue is to come in June of 2019, is June 15th is when our portion of the revenue is to be received.
So I'm sorry, so the taxpayers, and I'm going to probably use terms that I shouldn't be using, so it's taxpayers subsidized him for 6 months. So he's carrying our money. Where's our portion of that advertising? The season's over, and we have no money in that advertising.
Okay, but the agreement,
I don't see an agreement. That's what I don't understand.
There is an issue with that we're dealing with one of the pledge agreements that we have to deal with, and it's a sensitive issue. That once we deal with that issue, we can sign the agreement, but we do have an understanding that the advertising revenue is to come to the town in June of the following year, not before then.
Well, the original agreement says here on June the 15th, 2018.
That's when the agreement started, but the payment is the following year. It's 12 months after. So.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, sloppy accounting, and I'm not being disrespectful, but if I was running a business the way people are holding my money, that's our money, that's the taxpayers' money. And why is he holding it and we don't get a portion of that? So at least he could give us 10 or 20,000.
Yeah, and he will,
Well, we'll see,
it's just,
I just
there are
don't
other people
understand.
that,
Go through.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the 57 businesses that are advertised in the Accipiter Arena, we're not going to be getting all the money for that?
oh no, because we get a portion of that. So the agreement is that we would get $30,000 of the total advertising revenue. And if they go above a certain dollar amount, then we get a percentage of that. And this was the highest one. We know for our RFP, this was the highest amount that we received from 3 other firms that bid for this. So some of them were as low as $10,000 or $15,000.
So if we collected 90,000, we only get 30,000.
This one here is, that was based on roughly $90,000, yes. Yeah.
So we get, okay.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so we put an RFP out for this. Why didn't we go out on our own and obtain the advertising and collect the $90,000?
That wasn't my decision. So through you, Mr. Mayor, that was the former CEO's decision.
So, and piggybacking on Councillor Kaur, with this agreement not being signed, it is my understanding that there wasn't proper communication between the town, well, I'll say the town, and the Junior B team with respect to the provisions in some of the agreements that the main donors made, and that wasn't provided to the Junior B team, thus resulting in a lot of the questions and the lack of this being signed at this point in time.
Yes. And there's one donor that we just need to get some clarification on before we can do that. And I just don't want to go into that detail right now in public.
So if I could ask a question, so for his RFP of 90,000 and we got 30, so then I take it then he earned his money by getting the advertising, and then did he have to put the boards onto the rinks? Is that how that worked? Do you remember how that RFP worked out?
No, his job was to get the advertising.
Yes.
And then the town would arrange, with, someone would come and put the
Okay.
boards up. Yeah.
Okay, so his whole thing in this RFP was just to go out and get sponsors?
Well,
Basically.
to get the sponsors, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
But this was the highest of all of the RFPs.
Yes, yes, and you had three
We
altogether?
had 3, at least 3.
And this was the highest one?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, could we see a copy of this RFP? And wouldn't it have been important that the city council has this RFP and not surprised? And what's the agreement? We have this original contract that no one signed. So I think, if we're going to put a report together, we get all the information, not bits and bytes of it. And I still have a lot more questions here.
Sure.
So the donations of the seats that we raised, and I'm not too sure what we paid for, and I don't see a donation line on your report.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the donation revenue does not go through the MCC because that pertains to the community center. That's part of the paying off of the community center. So it's not part of operations, it's part of the capital campaign.
So where does that show anywhere in our reports?
It doesn't show up there because it's showing up under my pledge report. So here's my pledge report, and the seat sales are on my pledge reports.
So wouldn't you think we would have that same information in front of us, so I wouldn't ask that stupid question?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, this is an operation report, and my understanding is we're looking at the operations of the MCC. That's a separate report if you want to look at the capital campaign of the MCC. That's completely separate. Because I thought that the decision was to understand the operations of the MCC so you can approve the 2019 operating budget. So if you want to see that, I've got that information.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So since that agreement has not been signed, can it be, once we get our little portion of the 30,000, can we determine that nil and void and then get the pledges ourselves moving on for the next season so we can collect the full 90,000? We actually paid for those sponsorships, so we didn't even get a correct 30,000.
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a 3-year agreement.
Nothing signed though. And there's no agreement.
That's the RFP went out that way, so that's what's binding us is the RFP. When it was awarded through an RFP. and that's what binds the town.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I send out an RFP and then I accept a vendor, prior to accepting a vendor, the RFP would not bind them. I would do either a contract or a purchase order, and that would be the binding. Here, we have an agreement with the whole back page unsigned.
Yeah, and the reason, through you, Mr. Mayor, the reason for that is that we had some outstanding issues that we were dealing, that other people were dealing with, and they weren't resolved, and this is where we are right now. So we're resolving them.
Is there any, sorry, is there any possibility we can look at this contract or this RFP, any way that we can get out of it, so we can collect the money for the town, like Councilor Wink suggested? Why wouldn't we get the sponsors ourselves and collect the full?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will follow up with our lawyers. That's all I can do right now.
Thank you.
I can't answer that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a couple more questions. In the Junior B agreement, he has a concession that he was going to pay us $2,000. Where does that show up on the revenue side of your report?
It would be under the facilities rentals.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it.
Well, there's the multi-purpose space revenues. So that's where the rentals are going through there.
How far down on the page is
Okay,
that?
I see that.
You got it?
No, okay.
Second line.
Yeah.
So, but when I look at your revenue sheet here, I don't see that broken down. It's very confusing with that. And again, the more detailed we have, the less questions we would ask if we had more detail.
So there's the room rentals, so it's part of the room rentals, where we would have the $12,000 there for last year.
So it's in there,
Yeah.
and could we get that report broken down further so we could itemize each one?
Yep.
And through you, in the agreement, and if we look at, through you, Mr. Mayor, we look at materials and supply janitors. Like, why are we supplying janitors when we pay a fee of over $100,000? Why are we buying them
So
supplies?
through you, Mr. Mayor, as part of the RFP was that the supplies were separate. We are looking with commercial cleaners to see if they would be including the janitorial supplies. And so then that would that would increase the contract.
So
So
through-
either way, they charge us for it or we buy it.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so we signed a contract with the janitor firm for just labor, and we have to supply all the wax, the soap, and et cetera.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. But we are looking at it with commercial cleaners to see if it's cheaper for them to do that.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I worked in the business 40-something years, never seen a contract like that. Either they bid for the whole contract and they supply the machine, they supply the wax, they supply the soap. The only thing that we don't supply is the water. And I don't know who signed that contract, but again, we need to go back to it. And I can't find my notes, but we pay over 100-something thousand for this janitor service. Am I right?
It's 87,000 was last year's amount.
That's for 6 months.
That's for 6 months.
Well, it was actually later. It was August,
7.
yeah, 5 months, yeah.
So it's over $160,000 we pay, and plus we got to buy the supplies.
Well, it's based on hours. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's based on the hours to do the cleaning.
And I believe it probably also went out RFP'd.
Yeah, oh, yes,
Yeah,
of course it
and
did,
this
yeah.
was the best one.
Do we get that report too?
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor? Also, with the expense line, labor line, if I'm not mistaken, if my math's right, in August, I think it works out, if you took away your salary including operation budget, I don't understand the accounting, but it works out to $36,000. I worked out that your operational costs on an average month would be $41,000. and it's gonna leave us short at least $150,000 for the year, and maybe I'm wrong. I just think the labor line is different, and these were just,
So through you, Mr. Mayor, as you recall, that the first 6 months was a pilot project, was a pilot for the MCC on the delivery model. Staff have gone back for the 2019 budget and have made some revisions and cut back on hours and found some efficiencies, so the 2019 budget is coming in lower than the 2018 budget. So we can't use the 2018 numbers and extrapolate it.
okay, and through you, Mr. Mayor, why isn't the interest payments on the debt part of the expense line? Every other business, if you bought a building and you had to mortgage it, it's part of the operating cost.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, this is the pro forma that was provided to council at the time, and it was not shown on here. So the pro forma that I'm using is the original one, putting in the budget numbers for 2019. It's the format that I inherited.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, we're going to change that format to give a real picture of what this community center is costing the citizens on a year-to-year basis.
Well, it's your choice. I mean, right now, through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't show the interest and principal payments are shown through other line items in the operating budget, but if you want it shown here, it's up to you.
Okay, and I think my last question, and I'm sorry to hog all the questions, the $1.7 million that people donated, we had to borrow money on it because we booked the $3 million. Am I right?
Are you talking about the pledges?
Yes.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, we have pledge agreements, and the pledge agreements are over multi-years. And so the $1.7 million that's required will be funded by the cash that's coming in directly from the pledges. So it's not, that's where the revenue is coming from to fund that. So it's not coming out of the tax levy.
So.
It's a timing issue.
Oh, I know that. And what I'm getting at is 1.7, but we'll pay about an interest, and I'm not good, about $75,000 to $80,000 a year interest on money that if we would have booked it properly and said that if we're only going to collect $200,000 a year, we should have booked the $200,000, and then we wouldn't be able to go out and borrow the $1.7 million. Am I right? If we would have done that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, are you referring to when the funds were actually, when the pledges were collected?
Yeah, so we booked it somewhere, and that's why we have to borrow off of it.
So how we do this is that we actually match the pledge agreements of when the cash is coming in. That's how we do it. So when the pledge agreement was signed over multiple years, then we do, actually I have it right here, we have a cash flow statement of when the pledges are coming in, and that's how it's done. So.
No, I appreciate it through you, Mr. Mayor. So why did we borrow the 1.7? So somewhere down in our accounting, we said that we had $3 million somewhere. We booked it in one of our transactions.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, no, you don't record pledge revenue until you receive it. So what we have is we have $3.2 million of signed agreements, and then the signed agreements, we have a cash flow of the multiple years when the cash is coming in. So the cash is actually recorded when it's received. That's the accounting treatment of pledges.
Okay, so last one, I'm getting confused. So why did we borrow $1.7 million?
We haven't borrowed it yet. That's for the 2019 budget. Because we have a bridge loan of $13.5 million, of $12 million, which pertains to the land sale that's going to be sold in East Fawn Hill. And then the difference is the shortfall in the timing of when the pledges are coming in. That's what the 1.7 is. If we had received the $3 million all at one time, we wouldn't have to have borrowed that.
Yes,
So it's a
exactly.
timing issue.
No, I understand. So somewhere down the road, we said, through you, Mr. Mayor, we said that there's $3 million, we're going to book it, and now we're going to borrow 1.7. And I'm sorry, I'm not a great businessman, but to me, if someone's going to pledge $3 million, I wouldn't go out and borrow 1.7. That's all. I don't get it, but.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the bridge loan is money that was borrowed by Infrastructure Ontario to help us complete the MCC. And, you know, if the original plan of the building was that $12 million was going to be received from the land sales didn't happen last year. They're going to happen this year. But because we didn't have all that money in from the fundraising, from the pledges, then that's the shortfall that we have to borrow. But we have the cash that's coming in from the pledges that will pay for that, and that's where the money's coming from.
Okay, I have two more questions, and I'm sorry I'm hogged. The opening ceremonies on September 21st, where's that? Is that a revenue, or is that part of the community center, or was that paid out in a different part of city coffers? Of 87, I think it cost us $87,000 for the grand opening. Is it in this? So
through you, Mr. Mayor, the grand opening was covered under other special events in the RCW budget, and there were revenues that we had to cover that. So it's not in this budget.
Came out of recreation and wellness.
Yes, under special events, yes.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, are we gonna, what is your estimate as the chief operating officer? What is the estimated deficit are we gonna have with the MCC?
For what, for 2019?
Yes. I know we have, if I'm not mistaken here,
We've got,
529,000? Am I right?
no, it's 608,000.
6.8, but that's not without the interest.
That's correct.
So we could be in the $1 million ballpark.
The interest. Yeah, the interest is separate. Yes, that's correct.
So we could be in the, through you, Mr. Mayor, we could be in the $1 million park. And through I don't know if my colleague, Mr. Councilman Hillebrand, is going to address the 542,000. Is that going to be efficient enough? Or are we going to borrow another $500,000 to offset the hydro?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we believe, my partner, who is Mr. Gordon Rasco, and I have been diligently working on this, and we believe that the budget is sufficient for the hydro, for the MCC. And we're actually looking to come up with significant cash savings on that area. We just have to determine what exactly is causing our peak loads and our demand loads, and once we can analyze that from an engineering standpoint, our goal is to come up with an engineered solution that will resolve this problem. We discussed with two of our vendors today. The vendors were the electrical contractor and the HVAC contractor in detail where the large electrical loads are, and now we're in the process of reviewing each drawing that imposes these significant loads, and we'll be talking to Ontario Hydro, and both these contractors have given us their personal contacts, along with Mr. Marr, like our Director of Public Services was there with us, and I believe we had a significant relationship established today with the contractors, and we're making significant progress on that hydro bill.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, could anybody ask me a question? Why didn't we put LED lights in originally? I walked through the building today, and it's fairly a new building, and we could have spent a little bit more and save a lot.
That's happened. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll answer that question. We asked the same question, but our contractors said every fixture we have and every light we have there is an LED light. So we are in the process of reviewing that all as well. But that's what they confirmed with us today.
I just, through you, Mr. Mayor, I just put in LED lights and they're not LED lights in the MCC.
Well, there's a lot of different LED lights formations.
Okay. And then I'm,
So, I have a question for it. So we have the interest, we have our expenses, so when we do get East Fond Hill and the infrastructure loan set up, what is the principal payment we have to make every year to cover the the MCC?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the principal and interest payment is $1.1 million.
Oh, so that's combined?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Councilor Chopin.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to go back on that contract there with the Junior B team, where they have the concession for $2,000 a month, or a year, which works out to $166.66 a month. That gives them the whole canteen. Can that contract, when does that expire?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think there's like 3 years left.
2021.
2021.
Now, with that contract, does he get use of the kitchen that's in our Kersey room as well upstairs?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if he's doing the catering, he does, yes.
And
But
there's-
most of the catering's done downstairs. Don't forget, he's there from like 8 o'clock in the morning till late at night, and a lot of the hour in 7 days a week. So a lot of other arenas have a hard time even getting someone to do a concession stand, because it's not busy all the time.
$166 a month doesn't seem hardly would even cover the hydro for the deep fryers, the freezers.
I do know, Counselor, that in the old arena, there is sometimes that we couldn't get anyone to run the concession stand and they had to stay, they were empty. So, I know what you're saying.
I could see that in the old arena, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
But this here has 2 rinks, gymnasiums, walking track, room rentals, so there's a lot of activity. For $166 a month, I think you wouldn't have a hard time finding anybody to rent that.
Yeah. Well, again, was that RFP?
Well, no, that was part of,
Oh, that
Mr.
was
Mayor,
part
that was part of an
of
existing
Junior B
contract.
team, yeah.
So we can revisit that when that contract's up.
But that's 3 years from now.
Yep.
and through you, Mr. Mayor, how many games went over 500 attendance?
None. So the numbers, and actually the numbers are also posted on the website, under the Junior B website. So there weren't any over 500.
And who counts that? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Well,
Probably, imagine it's the owner.
yeah, they have to, I don't know who counts. I mean, all the Junior B hockey teams have to count the attendance. There's someone that counts it.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, am I correct? Anything over 500, we get 40% of the gate? Or do we just get, it's in the
Yeah,
agreement?
we get something for it, but the highest I think they reached was 410 this year.
Sorry. My last question, sorry.
No, go
And
ahead.
the Junior B rental revenue, is that under arena revenues?
Yes. Like the rental revenues for what, for the concession stand? No.
No, for the Junior Bs, like ice time and
Oh, yes,
everything else.
yes,
That's all under
yes.
arena, that's grouped into arena
So
revenues.
if, through you, Mr. Mayor, the summary here, this one here,
Mm-hmm.
breaks out the revenue on the teams though.
So, Director of Public Works, Jason?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a couple items I have been able to do a little bit of digging on. Unfortunately, our Director of Recreation is not with us tonight. But I did get some answers on some of the questions that were surrounding some of those contracts. So I have been informed that the advertising contract, that RFP, that contract is responsible for the cost of putting up the actual advertisements on the boards. The town doesn't cover that. That's underneath that RFP, for that supplier to take care of that. So that's part of that contract. Also, with respect to the cleaning contract, I have confirmed that that's pretty much standard. The way they operate most of their contracts is that they supply the labor and the equipment, and they supply the chemicals that do the cleaning. And the town or the owner would be responsible for paper consumables. So that's the way they operate on most of their contracts, and that's the way this one operates as well.
Thank you. Director? Councilor Wink?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, just as an observation, and it's not a question, or it's just an observation that a lot of, initially, when the community center was being built, there was debate whether we should do 1 ice pad, 2 ice pads, or whatever. But the revenues are pretty well bang on what was forecasted initially, and the ice revenues are providing good income to us. Where we fell off the table was the gymnasium revenues. You know, the initial forecast for 6 months was $146,000, yet the actuals were $31,000. And if you look at, you've got 2 rinks generating almost $300,000 when it's being rented out minimum at $140 per hour, and you've got 2 gyms that are being rented out at $20 per hour, yet the projections were essentially half of what the ice surfaces were, and it should have come in considerably less. So we need to do a lot of work on boosting the revenues of the gyms going forward, and I think you know, we may have given away the farm with respect to the hours that are being given to one user group, when we could have been utilizing some of those prime hours or those later evening hours for other groups, for adults that would be doubling our revenue for those particular hours. So there are opportunities going forward of increasing our revenues.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I know that the Director of Recreation is looking at that and also looking at, addressing those issues. Because that was the problem that was encountered.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, so getting back to the advertising, so when is the city going to receive their first check? Is it going to be June 18, 2019, which is 2 months from now? And is it going to be $30,000?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's not going to be $30,000 because of the issues that were encountered because of the restrictions. The latest date that the money will be received will be by June 15th is the latest date.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, so let's make it clear, he's going to make 90, he collected 90,000, and we're going to get,
He didn't collect 90, it was
I'm sorry,
63.
63, I apologize.
Okay.
Okay, and we're going to get less than half.
But there was, through you, Mr. Mayor, there were also costs incurred there to put those boards up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also, was this individual responsible for taking the advertising that was incorrectly put on the Zamboni?
Taken off.
He had to take that off, and plus he also had to take some advertising out of the ice.
Yeah,
That shouldn't have been there.
yeah.
Again,
There was about $39,000 of lost revenue. Yeah.
okay, thank you. So I don't have to remind council that staff did go through this performer or the matrix for the community center as requested by council. I believe it took effect 1st of March, right around there. So we did knock a lot of expenses. We trimmed the labor force. So the next 4 months, hopefully, if we're going to get monthly reports on the MCC, and I would think that by we're going to be entering what I call a dead zone for that MCC in a lot of ways, because the hockey's going to be way down. But whatever, we are going to have summer ice. But by the end of this, yeah, we have lacrosse. So hopefully by the end of the summer, when we get those monthly reports back, we should see a lower monthly expenses on that.
Yep.
Okay. Any other, yes, Councilor?
Here's a point of interest. So this being the largest asset that we have here in the town of Pelham, and moving forward, this is not to point fingers or anything. What we need to do is cut our expenses and generate more revenue so we can run this at what it's supposed to be run at, like we said last year. So working by getting a report every month hopefully that'll help us learn from mistakes and what we need to fix. Like example, contracts that are unsigned, lost revenue through different areas there, the canteen, room rentals. So we got to attract more revenue.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, council has established 3 advisory committees, the Utility Sustainability Committee, the Hospitality Committee, and the User Group Committee. So, and each one of those committees has a council rep on there, and that's exactly what's happening. We're looking at decreasing the expenses, finding efficiencies, and also increasing revenues. So that's the goal. And the Director of Recreation, in fairness to her, this is the first time she's actually had the opportunity to run the whole facility.
Thank you.
But last thing through you, Mr. Mayor, if we can somehow get out of that agreement, the advertising agreement, and do the advertising ourselves, that would be a huge revenue for the town. If that's something, we have an unsigned contract. If you look at that RFP, and there was no purchase order, if we can get out of that, that's going to be huge. So I would make that a priority if we could.
But definitely, I'm sure the CAO will be talking to our lawyer.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm gonna call the motion. I guess I read it, but let's read it again. Be it resolved that council receive the 2018 Meridian Community Center report for information. Any more discussion? Last call? Okay, all those in favor of accepting it for information? Thank you. Any opposed? One opposed. Motion carries. Okay. 7.2, the 1120 Hay Street Council Direction on Next Steps. So, motion put forward by Councilor Hildebrand, seconded by Councilor Wink. Be it resolved that staff be directed to provide council with a report outlining the steps required to effect removing the lands known municipally as 1120 Hay Street from the real estate market. The report should provide information on any Planning Act, financial, and bylaw considerations in this regard. And before I open it to council, Madam CAO, do you have any comments on this, or anybody should hear from council first?
Yeah.
Okay. Questions on this motion? Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have an amendment to make to that motion.
Yes, Councilor.
Be it resolved that the following amendment be considered, that the financial information be reported, included, but not be necessarily limited to the financial implications associated with the sale, retention of 1120 Hay Street, commonly known as the old arena lands, and further, that the report provides information detailing how the proceeds from the sale would be used, including an itemized report of the prior year's carry-forward capital projects totaling $2.6 million, and a report that provides a long-term plan detailing the use of the old arena property. And further, that the report be provided for consideration and debate at the Committee of the Whole meeting scheduled for May the 6th, 2019. And further, that the report be made available to the public at least 10 days in advance of the May 16th, 2009 meeting.
Okay. So he needs a second?
It's a seconder by Councillor Hahn.
I'm sorry?
The second is there by
Okay, he
Councillor.
already got a seconder. Okay, so any discussion on the amendment that Councilor Hildebrand just read? Okay,
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so then we're going to be asking for a report there, correct? I didn't hear the last part. Report saying, a detailed report of where the funds are going to
yes.
for the sale?
If you want, I'll read it again. Do you want me to read it again?
Just that last part I didn't hear.
Let's go this way then. That one? Yeah. Okay. And further, that the report provides information detailing how the proceeds from the sale would be used, including an itemized report of the prior year's carry-forward capital projects totaling 2.6 million, and a report that provides the long-term plan detailing the use for the old arena property.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Any more discussion on the amendment? Okay, so now we have to vote on the amendment, and then we vote on the resolutions. All those in favor of Council Hildebrand's amendment? Okay. Okay, and opposed? No one. So the amendment carries. So now,
Just call for the motion as amended.
oh, okay. So call for a motion on the, call for a vote on the motion as amended. All those in favor of the motion? Okay,
amended.
and motion carries. Okey-doke. Where are you? 7.3? Okay. Motion put forward by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Chofie. Be it resolved that council hereby approves the recommendations resulting from the following. SCOW-03/2019 Special Committee of the Whole, March 11th, 2019. Any discussion on that? Okay. All those in favor of the motion? Okay, motion, and any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so request to lift consent agenda items. So consent agenda items will be anything from 9.1 to 9.7. Let me, yes, indeed. So after reading the agenda items, does any councillor have, yes, Councillor
Yes, I'd
Kaur.
like to lift 9.51.
Any other items by any councillors? Okay, so, now.
Read that one.
Okay. So now I read all these. Okay. If I had a drink of water, it'd be better, but that's fine.
Oh, okay.
No, that's okay. Okay, so a motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that the following, please excuse me while I have a drink. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Be it resolved that the following consent agenda items be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. 9.1, presentation of recommendations arising from COW or P&P for council approval. Be it resolved that council hereby approves the recommendations resulting from the following. 1, P&P-02/2019, Policy and Priorities, March 18th, 2019. 9.2, minutes approval, committee. Be it resolved that council receive the P&P-02/2019 Policy and Priorities Committee minutes dated March 18th, 2019 for information. 9.5, information and correspondence items, and then we will, of course, skip 9.51, go down to 9.52, Town of Lincoln, Region of Niagara Waste Collection. Be it resolved that council receive correspondence from the Town of Lincoln dated March 19th, 2019, regarding the Region of Niagara Waste Collection for information. 9.5.3, City of Toronto, providing certainty in the planning appeals process, clearing the backlog at the local planning appeal tribunal. Be it resolved that council receive correspondence from the City of Toronto dated March 4th, 2019, regarding the planning appeals process for information. 9.5.4, correspondence, provincial review of regional government. Excuse me. Be it resolved that council receive correspondence from the town of Lincoln, the city of Welland, township of West Lincoln, and the town of Grimsby regarding the provincial review of regional government for information. So we go back to 951 now, right?
Not yet. Call for the question on this one?
Oh, okay. So all those in favor of the correspondence items I've just read, or any debate on any of those? Okay, all those in favor of that motion concerning the ones that were read? Yeah, there you go, thank you. And no opposed. Okay. So Councillor Corr, you pulled 9.5.1.
Yes, I'd just like the treasurer to go through that report. It just talked about the cash flow notice and what is it? And there's a,
This is, through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a grant that's received to the town. Our portion of that is, the allocation is $40,500. The reason why we receive a low amount on this grant is that the calculation of it is based on the assessment per household. Our assessment per household is higher than other areas, and that's why our allocation is lower. So this grant tries to give more of the funds to municipalities that have a lower assessment per household.
so through you, Mr. Mayor, where's that 40,500 going? And what part of? Where is it earmarked?
Chairman Supposed Partnership Fund. Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a small dollar amount. I don't know exactly right now where it's going. Like it's just,
Okay.
yeah, it's a
Through
small.
you, Mr. Mayor, next.
I can get back to you on that for
Okay.
sure, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions on 9.5.1? Okay. Okay. So a motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Back to 9.5.1, 2019 Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund release documents. Be it resolved that council receive correspondence from the Minister of Finance regarding the allocation of the 2019 Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund for information. Any further debate? All those in favor? All those against? Motion carries. Okay. Oh, initial? Okay, so we're all done this, items for separate consideration, do we have any?
You're on mayor's report.
Oh, I'm down here. Okay, oh, is that where we are? Okay, what, 11.1.1? Okay. Okay, so a motion put forward by Councillor Trophy, seconded by Councillor Corr. Be it resolved that council for the town of Pelham request the Peninsula West Power Board to rescind Mayor Junkin's appointment, and that council for the town of Pelham nominate Councillor Bob Hildebrandt for the position of a director for Peninsula West Power Board of Directors to replace the appointment of said mayor. That Penn West Power, Inc. be and is hereby requested to approve this appointment at its next meeting, and that Councillor Hildebrand will be authorized to sign Peninsula West Power corporate documents on behalf of the town, and that Penn West Brian Walker be so advised of this recommendation. Just for the audience information, the mayor usually holds the seat on this board because we have our in-house electrical engineer expert. I am going to step down from the board and let Councillor Hildebrand take over that position. So that's what this is all about. So any other discussion on this? Oh, Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate this assignment. I've been looking towards being on this board for 10 years because I believe there's a big opportunity for us as a town to be recognized and establish that we are going to make substantial savings, hopefully for all the residents as well, and our hydro bills.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other comments? Okay, so all in favor of this motion and all against, and the motion carries. So now we're down to, where we go? Staff reports requiring.
I can answer the other question.
Oh.
Can you do that now?
Councilor Corr, the question you had for that 9.51 as to whether 40,000 was allocated,
Yeah.
the CAO
Yeah,
has
so
the,
through you, Mr. Mayor, this is an unconditional grant, and we put it through general government revenue, so it's just a grant given to us to help with administration. So it's not specific to anything. It's just additional revenue. Hope that
Through you,
helps.
Mr. Mayor, could we not move it over to parks and buy some swings or something like that? We have people in our community looking for swings, climbing equipment. I think administration has enough money.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, it's just part of the operating budget. That's what it is. Yeah.
So we can't move it?
Can't move right now.
So when I'm through you, Mr. Mayor, just don't spend it. Maybe we can move it over somewhere. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
okay. So, do we have any staff reports? What should I call it? Oh, okay. So we have a motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that council receive this report on the establishment of a court of revision, and that council appoints 3 members of council to sit on the court of revision, being the following. So this court of revision, as you all read in the report, is has to be formed with the because of the Drainage Act of Ontario, and it is for when we have a engineer's report that is going to be coming forward on the drain. And at that time, if there's anyone in the public that wants to comment on that report, then, or question the report, I suppose, then we have to sit and rule on whatever objections are made to the engineer's report. So it's probably, I would think it's this is the only drainage work that's going to be done this year. So, I should ask I'm sorry, Madam Plan, is that correct what I just clarified?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, the Court of Revision is required under the Drainage Act to be established, and it has some very specific authority, and specifically, it would deal with any appeals to assessment. And if there is an appeal to an assessment, if you're going to reduce in one area, you have to make it up in another area in terms of the court of revision. That's the kind of the limited scope. This needs to be established for the engineer's report with respect to the culvert replacement on Poth Street. And so it would be dealing with any appeals on that matter, given that the town is the only body that's being assessed with respect to that project, that engineer's work, because it's a road project and it's being assessed to the road authority. It's unlikely that there would be any appeals to the assessment. However, we still do need to formally establish a court of revision.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, so we need 3 volunteers. Please remain seated. Okay, Councillor Wink, Councillor Hildebrand, and Councillor Trophy. Thank you very much.
Good choice.
Oh, you can fill them in later, right? Okay. Okay, so all those in favor of the selections and the motion? Okay, excellent. And any opposed? No, motion carries. Thank you. And now, motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that council receives the report, update gas main budget needs, Station Street water main replacement, and that council approve the use of carry forward funds from previous year's projects to fund the additional costs associated with the gas main relocation to accommodate the water main installation. And if council will recall that the last meeting at COW, I believe, the expenditure came forward. Council directed the Director of Public Works to sit down with all parties involved to give the project one last kick at the can to see if we could lower the cost to the town at all, and the director has the results of that meeting.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did sit down with the parties that, the stakeholders in this project. Included in that meeting was the mayor, myself, our manager of engineering. We had the design consultant, Carrie T. Howe Engineering. We had the contractor that's doing the current installation of the water main at that meeting, Duffin Contracting, and we also had Enbridge Gas attend that meeting, as well as our acting CAO. So that's, we had our meeting. We kicked around some ideas on how, if we could, relocate that water main. To give you a little bit of an update, refresh your memory, the reason we're having the discussion is that there is conflicts currently with the gas main between Summersides and Pelham Town Square, south to Port Robinson Road. The current gas main is located in the east side of the shoulder of the road. And the new water main is being installed adjacent to that gas main. So there are certain restrictions, working restrictions that you have when installing any services near the gas main. In this case, we need to maintain at least 1 meter clearance while working around that gas main. It was thought in the outset of the design that we would have that clearance. From what I've learned recently as well is that what's holding us up here is that we have pinch points in that gas main. It's they call them thrust connections. So these are connections that are highly suspect to failure if they're excavated within close proximity. So this is part of the reason that we now need to look at relocating that gas main in order to install the water main in its intended location as it's currently designed. The future plans for Station Street are to urbanize and reconstruct the entire road. When we urbanize and reconstruct the road, we take it from a semi-rural cross-section, which you see right now with shoulders and ditches, to concrete curbs, sidewalks, and in doing that, we lower the grade of the road, sometimes in up to about half a meter. We end up lowering the grade of the road so that we can get proper drainage on that roadway. When that project happens, and right now we're forecasting that project to take place in 2023, we won't have cover on that gas main, so that gas main will have to be lowered at that point in time. Either way, the gas main is getting relocated. So that is not going to change. That gas main is going to be relocated. What we discussed at the meeting was in order to save on the cost of relocating the gas main now, is there ways that we can rework the installation of the water main in order to avoid that conflict. So in essence, what happens is with water mains, you have to maintain certain horizontal and vertical working clearances to your other services and utilities. So in order to relocate the water main to the west side of the road, away from the current gas main, and where you have to have a 2.5 meter offset from your nearest storm or sanitary sewer. That puts the new water main almost underneath the concrete curb, which would be on the west side of Station Street in the future, which would cause issues with servicing that water main in the future. Obviously, you're not just doing a road repair, or we would prefer to have it into the shoulder of the road, into the ditch, into the boulevard. But where it would have to be relocated would cause future issues with surfacing that water main. As well, because we have to take into account the elevations and the vertical clearances. If you can appreciate, in the reconstruction of the Station Street, we're going to be running a 4-foot diameter storm sewer trunk down the middle of that road. And the depth to get down below that service, we would be taking our water main from approximately 1.7 meters down to about 4 meters. So in order to get to the other side of the road. So there are ways that we could probably try to bring the services down and around and get them underneath the services, but we would be installing the services now in anticipation of where that storm sewer is going to be. The roadway is designed so we know, and from an engineering perspective, where that sewer could be, but then we have to make sure that we're getting those proper clearances. In the future, servicing those water services, if we're working at 4 meters depth and working in a roadway, the cost of doing the servicing on those services will be increased in the future, as well as there will be additional safety concerns related to that work. From a cost perspective at this point, if you can appreciate, the water main was positioned on the east side of Station Street because it's servicing all the properties on the east side of the road. If we bring it to the west side, obviously the length of your services will increase. The cost of the installation of the water main project will increase as well. If we move the water main to the west side of Station Street, again, I mentioned the conflict with the curb and the future reconstruction of Station Street, but we'll also be incurring costs at this point in time with respect to reconstruction of Emmett Street and College Street. And where we would have to position the water main at this point in time, we would be digging up those intersections, replacing cross culverts. We would have culverts on top of water mains, which is not best practices for water main installation. So with that being said, that's when we looked at all these ideas. It was determined, and because we have to relocate the gas main when we reconstruct Station Street anyway, it was determined that where it's designed currently is the best location and the best alternative moving forward.
Thank you. So just a little more background. Just when you think you've got something expensive in your own life, Enbridge hires a contractor to bury the line, and to do that much line is $13,000. So to do 307 meters was just a tad over $500,000, and the town's cut on that is 35%. It's an agreement we have with Enbridge, so our expenses was $185,000. But I kept, when we had the meeting, I made several remarks that's a lot of, you don't get much for $13,000. But it's the way it is, and I appreciate, Jason, that you and the guy, you were able to bring everybody back to meet one last time, have a kick at the can. It was a pretty good discussion as to why they had to stay there, and council appreciates the effort you put in that meeting.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, just to give you, again, another snapshot, we have a franchise agreement with Enbridge Gas, as we do with most of our utility companies. So our franchise agreement is specifically that. We give them the right to basically have their utility within our road allowance. When we do work that causes them to relocate their gas main as a rite of passage through our right-of-way, we cover 35% of that cost, and the utility company covers 65% of the installation cost. And that's a franchise agreement that we've had in place. It gets renewed every 20 years. So it's been a long-standing agreement.
Thank you, Jason. Any other questions on this?
Yeah, just for you, Mr. Mayor. You're saying that they're possibly going to be, they were scheduled to remove it in 2023? Or did I hear that wrong? I was.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as it stands right now, the Station Street reconstruction project, which would include the full urbanization of that roadway, it's tentatively in the town's 20-year capital forecast to reconstruct that road in 2023.
Okay.
And when we do reconstruct that road, the gas main will have to be lowered ahead in advance of that reconstruction project. And as a best practice, you would always like to get your utility company in to have their work completed, out of the way, before your contractor gets on site. Unfortunately, in this case, because we didn't identify that issue, we currently have a contractor that's installing a water main for us. So timing-wise on this, Enbridge is ready to mobilize, but they're going to be about 5 or 6 weeks to complete their works. At the meeting, we did discuss schedule with the contractor because we want to keep that contractor moving and keep that contract moving forward. So the plan will be to have the contractor come on site. They've installed the water main from Highway 20 to Pelham Town Square. The idea would be for them to come in prior to Enbridge coming on site, commissioning that water main. So when they commission that, they pressure test it, they ensure that that installation is proper prior to charging the water main. Once they charge that water main, they'll start installing services down from Highway 20, working back towards Pelham Town Square, and we'll have Enbridge come in and start their gas main relocation work. So we'll try to keep both those contractors going and separate them through distance, which is required under the Ministry of Labor, and we'll try to keep both those contractors going to keep the project moving forward.
Thank you, Director.
So actually, through you, Mr. Mayor, so if it was going to be done, it has to be done in 2023, we'd actually be saving a little bit probably with inflation by having it done in 2019,
Yeah.
right? The way we see the inflation is going 2%.
I appreciate your happy thoughts. You're right. You're exactly right.
Take that as a compliment.
Okay, no other questions or debate on this? Okay, so I'll just read the last half. The council approved the use of carry-forward funds from previous year's projects to fund the additional costs associated with the gas main relocation to accommodate the water main installation. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, unfinished business. That was it?
Down to bylaws.
Oh, down to bylaws. Okay. Yes, bylaws, of course. Motion put forward by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the council of the town of Pelham having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Number 1, bylaw number 4087, 2019, being a bylaw to provide for drainage works in the town of Pelham for the replacement of the Poth Street culverts on Big Creek Drain, first and second reading only. Excuse me. And second, bylaw 4088, 2019, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 3728, 2016, to establish 2019 fees and charges to be collected by the corporation of the town of Pelham and to repeal bylaw number 3973, 2018, as noted in item number 2 herein bylaw. And turn the page, number 3, 4089, 2019, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 4068, 2019, confirming various appointments to boards, commissions, and committees of the town of Pelham, and to appoint members to the Pelham Summerfest Committee, Schedule N, and to add Schedule Q to appoint members to the Pelham Audit Committee bylaw. And number 4, 4090, 2019, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a subdivision agreement with River Realty Development, 1976, Inc., and the Corporation of the Town of Pelham, River Estate Phase 2 Subdivision, River Realty Development, 1976, Incorporated, and the Corporation of the Town of Pelham. All those in favor of this motion?
There's one in there before you go to, I'd like to lift number 3, 4088-2019.
Wait. So number 3 then.
Number 2, 4088?
2, sorry.
I'm
2.
sorry, what number is that, Counselor?
4088.
Okay, so it's number 2 on the sheet. Okay, so that, go ahead, please. So you want to discuss something on this?
Yeah, I just want to discuss the portable ground signs. Giving it some consideration, there's a lot of user groups that use these ground signs and some small businesses and that. And it was a 25% increase on there. So I just want to reconsider that one, the portable ground signs.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I support Counselor, because I did get a call from a local businessman saying that over the last 3 to 4 years, it started at $45, and now all of a sudden it's $100. And, you know, we're here to support our local businesses, and he is a local business, and he just finds that it's going to be difficult to rent these portable units at $100 permit, so.
Any other counselors? Okay.
There's a lot of things like the user groups, you know, Kinsman Club, and a lot of these people use these portable signs around.
It was a 37% increase.
Yeah.
Yes. Any
Actually,
comment?
I'm just gonna pass it to the fire chief.
Oh, any comment from the bylaw fire chief?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't increased that since 2012. It's been $75 since that. Looking around the region, $100 is still lower than a lot of other municipalities. So in 2018, we issued 37 portable ground sign permits, and the majority of them are to that one vendor. So it's, if you were to take in, if you look at the process of taking in the application, processing it, issuing it, and then doing the accounts receivable here, $100 doesn't near cover our administration costs.
Okay, thank you for that. What should we do on that?
Counselor Stewart.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Stewart.
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, the other signs, like roof signs, wall signs, projecting signs, they're also a $100 fee, but those are, that's a one-time, where you get a permit to put that sign up on your building, and you pay the $100, and it's one time, right?
Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have the fee schedule in front of me, but
Okay, well,
depending on
that's-
the size of the sign and the type of sign, the fees vary.
Oh, okay, because it just has them listed here as, from going from $75 to $100.
That's the portable ground signs, I don't have the fee schedule in front of me, but
Oh, I
yes,
have it
that's
right here.
Those, the ones that are highlighted, so it has 2018, $75, and then it has 2019, $100 is highlighted. Those are the 3 changes?
5.
5? Yes, those are those one-time wall signs, portable signs.
Those are all short-term signs?
No, they're not short-term signs.
Okay,
Some, the portable ground signs are,
yeah.
the bylaw speaks to, they're mainly for people promoting short-time or short-term stuff. So they're allowed to have them up for 30 days, take them down for 30 days, put them up for 30 days, so forth.
Oh, but they have to put a motion together?
Through Mr. Mayor, I just don't know if council is looking to keep the rates the same as they are and not increase them, or what the percentage increase would be if we're going to amend the fee schedule in that respect.
I would like to amend it to keep the portable sign rate at $75. Like I said, a lot of these service groups in the town use these portable signs as well.
So does that need
So
a
I need a
motion?
seconder for that.
Okay, need a seconder by Councilor Core. Are you seconding that, Councilor? Yes. Okay.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification from the fire chief, you mentioned that it's predominantly one user?
Through Mr. Mayor, in 2018, we issued 37 portable ground sign permits, and the majority of them were the one supplier.
One
vendor.
supplier.
The one vendor that supplies these signs to your groups.
So is the supplier paying the $100 and they pass it on to the service clubs or whatever? Okay, thank you.
All done?
Yep.
Yeah. Any other discussion on this? So,
So you have a motion to amend to keep the portable sign rate at $75.
so we're gonna vote on that?
So I need a
Oh.
vote on that amendment.
Yes.
And then you could vote on the bylaw as amended. The
Okay.
fee schedule as amended.
Okay. So we're going to vote on the amendment to the bylaw, and the amendment is to keep the cost at $75 and would not raise it. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay, amendment carries. And now we'll vote
So now you're gonna vote on the
on the bylaw.
as amended.
Okay.
For that, so you
Yes.
divided the motion, so it's
Yeah.
just on bylaw number 2.
Yes. So now we put the amendment to number 2 to that bylaw. So we'll read this bylaw, which is bylaw as with the amendment to it. Bylaw 4088, 2019, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 3728, 2016, to establish 2019 fees. Am I reading the right one? I guess so.
This
Yeah,
one?
okay,
Mhm. And
okay.
you're just gonna say as amended.
Oh, okay.
Don't use.
Okay. Okay. It just doesn't have anything about portable signs in there, does it?
No, that's in the fee schedule, though.
Ah,
So only
okay.
in the fee schedule.
Okay, thank you. There we go. Okay, bylaw 4088, 2019, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 3728, 2016, to establish 2019 fees and charges to be collected by the Corporation of the Town of Pelham, and to repeal bylaw number 3973, 2018, as noted in item number 2 herein, as amended. All those in favor? All those against? Motion as amended carries.
And now you need to vote on the rest of the bylaws,
Oh.
because it was divided.
Okay, and now, as I read those bylaws, we will now vote on numbers 1, 3, and 4. All those in favor of those bylaws, please raise your hands. Any against? Excellent, and motion is carried.
Thank you.
And a motion from Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed, being a bylaw number 4091, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the first day of April 2019. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. And the motion put forward by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for April 15th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? All those opposed? This meeting is adjourned, and we'll have a